If you are between 55 and 65 and you are still putting £500 or £1,000 into your pension every month out of pure habit, there is a fair chance you are making a £12,547 a year mistake. Most retirement advice tells you to keep saving right up until the day you finally stop working. You have probably seen the spreadsheets promising 7% growth and telling you to aim for £1 million before you even think about slowing down. What that advice leaves out is a guaranteed income the UK government has already committed to paying you. That missing piece is the full new state pension, which has just risen to £12,547 a year under the triple lock. Because most retirement calculators ignore it completely, they can end up pushing you to work 3 to 5 years longer than you actually need to. I have watched this happen to people who are, by any sensible measure, already finished. They just never stop to check. Today I want to show you your coast number, the exact point where your pension pot stops needing new money from you and starts growing on its own. If you have already reached it, every extra year at your desk is not buying you a bigger retirement. It is spending the healthiest years you have left for a cushion you may never use. We are going to work out your personal handoff point using the 2026 state pension figures, and I think a lot of you are closer to it than you realize. If you are a UK saver who is tired of telling yourself just one more year and you want the actual maths on when you can stop, this channel is built for exactly that. Stick around, because the calculation in the next few minutes might change how you think about the rest of this year. There is a specific point in your pension where the maths quietly flips in your favor, and most people sail straight past it without noticing. Some planners call it the handoff stage, the moment your pot is growing faster from investment returns than you are adding to it yourself. Here is what that looks like in real numbers. Say you are putting £10,000 a year into your pension. Once your pot reaches around £430,000, a 7% nominal return adds roughly £30,100 in a single year, 3 times more than you are physically contributing. At that point, your own monthly payment barely moves the needle anymore. Think of your pension as being pushed by 2 separate engines. Engine 1 is your labour, the money that comes out of your salary every month. Engine 2 is the market itself, quietly compounding whatever you have already put aside. For years, Engine 1 does almost all the work. Then there comes a point where Engine 2 takes over and Engine 1 becomes close to irrelevant. This is where an old habit starts working against you. You have spent 20 or 30 years being the sensible one, the person who never missed a contribution. That identity is comfortable, and the pension industry has very little reason to remind you when you can stop. Fees are usually charged on the size of your total pot, so a bigger pot sitting there longer suits the business model better than it suits you. The real cost of missing this is not a crash or a scandal. It is years of your own income quietly diverted into a pot that was already big enough, while your actual life gets smaller to make room for the saving. Here is the maths that matters most. Say you already have £300,000 in your pension at 55, and from this point you stop adding a single penny. Using a realistic 5% return after inflation, that pot grows to roughly £538,757 by the time you reach 67, purely from Engine 2 doing its job. The ONS has pointed out that average pension pots for people aged 55 to 64 sit well below the eye-catching numbers you see online, but the handoff principle works the same way at smaller amounts too. It is not about hitting some huge headline figure. It is about the ratio between what is coming in from growth and what you are still forcing in from your own pocket. I have sat with people looking at exactly this kind of number and watched them still find it hard to believe. There is a catch with that £538,757 figure though. It is probably higher than you actually need because it ignores a guaranteed income the government is already paying you every single week. Here is the part almost every retirement calculator gets wrong for people in the UK. Most of the coast calculators you will find online were built with an American audience in mind, or they are so generic they skip your state pension altogether, as if it does not exist. It very much does. As of April 2026, the full new state pension is worth £241.30 a week, which works out at £12,547 a year, confirmed by the DWP. That is not a projection or a guess. It is a guaranteed government-backed income landing in your account for the rest of your life, on top of anything your own pension pays out. That £12,547 figure assumes a full national insurance record too, typically 35 qualifying years. If you have gaps from time out of work, or years spent self-employed with lower contributions, your actual state pension could land somewhat below that headline number. Which is exactly why checking your own forecast matters more than trusting an average. Once you bring that number into the calculation, everything shifts. Say you want £30,000 a year to live comfortably in retirement. The standard advice, using the well-known 4% rule, the guideline that says you can safely withdraw 4% of your pot each year without running out, tells you to build a private pension pot of £750,000 before you can safely stop. But if you take that £30,000 target and subtract the £12,547 the state pension already covers, you only need £17,453 a year from your own pot. Run that through the same 4% rule, and your real target pot is £436,325, roughly 42% lower than what the standard advice tells you to aim for. That is not a small rounding difference. It can be the entire reason someone keeps working through their early 60s when the real number says they already have enough. I used to run these numbers for people without including the state pension as part of the safety net at all. Looking back, I was effectively signing some of them up for 3 or 4 extra years of stressful work they never actually needed to do. It is an easy mistake to make when every generic calculator treats the state pension as an afterthought instead of the floor it actually is. There is a trade-off hiding inside this correction, though. Leaning on the state pension this heavily only works if you know exactly when it starts paying out, and that date has been moving. The state pension age is being phased up from 66 to 67 between April 2026 and April 2028, so if you were born on or after the 6th of March 1961, your state pension will not land until you turn 67. If you finish work at 65, that can mean 2 years where you need something like £25,000, £30,000 a year from your own savings alone, before that guaranteed income even begins. So you now have a lower, more honest target number and a guaranteed income helping you get there. But if you are a higher earner used to claiming 40% tax relief on every pound you put in, stopping can feel like handing money straight back to HMRC. That is not quite how it works, and there is a simple way around it. If you earn over £50,270 a year, you are probably getting 40% tax relief on every pound you put into your pension, and stopping that can feel like handing money straight back to HMRC. It is worth being honest about that feeling instead of pretending it does not exist, because for a lot of higher earners it is the real reason they keep contributing long after the maths says they could stop. The answer is not to lose that relief and save nothing instead. It is to change where the money goes once your pension has done its job. Think of it as moving from pension maxing to what I call ISA bridging, redirecting the same monthly amount you were already used to putting aside, just into a different account. For the 2026 to 2027 tax year, the ISA allowance is £20,000, and every penny of growth and withdrawal inside it is completely tax-free. That is about to matter even more, because from the 6th of April 2027, the cash ISA limit for anyone under 65 is being cut to £12,000 a year. If you are 65 or older, you keep access to the full £20,000 cash ISA allowance. Stocks and shares ISAs are not affected by that change at all. Here is why the destination matters so much. If every spare pound stays inside your pension, you end up pension rich and cash poor. Right now you can access that money from 55, but that age is rising to 57 from the 6th of April 2028, and history suggests it will not be the last increase. All that money sits completely untouchable until the government says otherwise, while your day-to-day life still needs paying for right now. The resilience version looks different. You hit your coast number inside the pension, so you know it is already on track without more contributions. Then that same saving habit gets redirected into your ISA instead, building a pot you can reach on your own terms at any age with no tax to pay on the way out. That is what creates a genuine bridge, letting you stop work before your pension technically allows it, using money that answers to you and nobody else. You now have the numbers and the strategy. What is left is the part nobody talks about enough, why it can feel almost physically uncomfortable to actually stop that direct debit after 20 or 30 years of never missing one. Stopping a habit you have kept for 20 or 30 years does something strange to your head, even when the numbers say it is completely safe. Behavioral economists call part of it loss aversion, the fact that pulling back on saving feels far worse than the actual pound-for-pound benefit that same saving ever felt good. There is also something more personal going on. If you have been the reliable one for decades, the person who never skipped a contribution even in a bad year, that has quietly become part of who you are. Deciding to stop can feel less like a financial decision and more like giving up a piece of your own identity. If any of that sounds familiar, it is worth saying clearly that this reaction is normal, not a sign that something is wrong with you. Redirecting money away from a SIP or workplace pension you have fed every month for 2 decades can feel like switching off your own oxygen supply, even while your coast number sits there proving you are already covered. The shift that actually helps is smaller than it sounds. You are not being asked to stop saving. You are being asked to change where the saving goes. Some people find it easier to give that new pot a name and a purpose, calling it something like a life enhancement fund rather than just another account, so the money still feels intentional instead of reckless. I remember a senior nurse who had built up around £500,000 in her pension and was still picking up extra shifts to top it up further. She was clearly exhausted, but she could not bring herself to stop, because for 30 years she had only ever built a system for saving money, never one for spending it. Nobody had ever shown her that the second half of the plan mattered just as much as the first. That is the emotional side sorted. But there is a very practical fear sitting underneath all of this too. What actually happens to your coast number if you stop contributing and the market drops 20% the following year? Say you have hit your coast number, you have stopped contributing, and then the market does what markets occasionally do. It drops sharply, the way it did back in 2008, and every account statement suddenly looks a lot smaller than it did a month earlier. Most people react the same way in that moment. They panic and start pouring money back into their pension right at the bottom, trying to make up for lost ground, or they go back to full-time work in a rush, assuming the plan has failed. Both reactions are understandable, and both usually make things worse rather than better. There is a steadier way to handle it, sometimes called a cash buffer, and it changes the whole picture. Instead of leaving your entire pot sitting in shares once you reach your coast number, you keep roughly 2 years' worth of what would have been your ongoing contributions somewhere safe, like a high-yield savings account or a money market fund separate from your investments. Here is why that small change matters so much. If the market falls 20% the year after you stop contributing, you genuinely do not need to react. Engine 2, the market side of your pension, is simply stalled for a while. Because you have that cash sitting to one side, you are never forced to sell your investments while they are down, and you can simply wait for the recovery to happen in its own time, the way markets have reliably done before. This is not about avoiding risk altogether. Your coast number already assumes long-term growth from the stock market, and that still holds true over time. The buffer only exists to cover the near term, the kind of 2 or 3 year dip that markets have recovered from again and again, so a single bad year never forces your hand. Your council tax bill and your energy bill do not care what the FTSE 100 did last week. They still land the same way, month after month, whether the market is up or down. That is the whole point of the buffer. It makes sure a bad year for the market never turns into a bad year for your own household bills. That is the safety net in place. So how do you actually put any of this into motion, starting with the very next thing you check? Turning this into action does not need to be complicated. There are really only 3 things worth doing, in order. First, get your state pension forecast directly from gov.uk and check your national insurance record, because gaps in your NI years can quietly reduce that £12,547 figure below the full amount. Second, work out your own gap number. Take the annual income you actually want in retirement and subtract your state pension from it. Whatever is left is the only amount your own pension pot needs to produce. Third, run that gap number through the 4% rule in reverse, multiplying it by 25, to find your real coast pot, the number that matters far more than any generic £1 million target. If your current pot is already within 10% of that figure, you do not have to make a dramatic decision straight away. Plenty of people ease into this by dropping to 3 or 4 days a week first, a gentler version some call soft coasting, before deciding whether to stop contributing altogether. Add it all up, and for a lot of you watching, the maths says the race is already won. The full new state pension of £12,547 is not some distant benefit sitting far in the future. It is a finish line that is moving steadily towards you every single year, whether you notice it or not. Money was only ever meant to be a tool for buying back your own time. There is no real prize waiting for anyone who collects more of that tool than they will ever get the chance to spend. If this has given you the clarity to stop worrying about one more year, that is exactly what this channel is here for. Subscribe for more UK-specific retirement strategies built around numbers like these, not guesswork.